welcome back to Meticulously Ridiculous. I'm your host, Jason. I mentioned before the song that I'll be discussing giving fans what they want. This is a very pop culture centered show, so I like to give people what they want. I like to be entertaining, hopefully. We all know the Super Bowl was this past week. I guess they played a game. It didn't seem like much of a game. But something that for many weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, or more importantly, the Super Bowl halftime show, it was speculated and even petitioned. Thousands of people, thousands of fans signed a petition to play Sweet Victory. If you're a SpongeBob SquarePants fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, Sweet Victory was a very popular song from a particular episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that was very big and anthemic. And a lot of fans really wanted to hear that during the halftime show because sadly we lost our good friend Steven Hillenburg, who is a native Oklahoman who helped create SpongeBob. And we lost him in November, sadly. So as a tribute to him, a lot of fans really wanted to hear that at the halftime show. So obviously we know Maroon 5, Travis Scott performing during the halftime show. We heard just the little intro to Sweet Victory, and then it went into Travis Scott's song. And from what I've seen all around the internet, things have not been very cheery in response to the entire Super Bowl as a whole, show-wise and entertainment-wise, wasn't really all what it was cracked up to be. So they're thinking, hey, we're hearing the intro. Oh, my Lord, this is going to be this is it. Finally, we're going to get some entertainment. And many people were extremely disappointed to not hear what they were expecting. And what would have been, I think, it sounds silly, maybe that so many people were outraged that something may be so insignificant, but it goes to show what true fans believe and enjoy and kind of want. So my point of bringing that up is, giving the fans what they want. I still having a hard time understanding why so many entertainment or so-called entertainment entities kind of refuse to do that. Thousands of people petitioned for this to happen, and they basically were kind of left hanging out there in the dark. Not to say that everybody that signs a petition should be automatically, given exactly what they want, but something that's kind of sweet and I would say harmless like this could have been a very special moment. And then recently, Steve Carell, we all know Steve Carell from The Office and a lot of movies, of course. He recently hosted an episode of Saturday Night Live. And during his opening monologue, we see several of his former Office castmates appear and pop up in the crowd during the opening monologue, and it was really funny, really sweet, and it was kind of teasing about a possible Office reunion. We know The Office is a very beloved show and has been beloved for many years, and it's been teased that they're possibly getting together for another go-round. I know a lot of people would be for that. Maybe there's a lot that would probably disagree because they're thinking, oh, The Office is perfect as it was, and why are we returning to Dunder Mifflin if it was kind of ended perfectly. Of course, as we know, I believe is the last season or maybe the last season and a half, Steve Carell had exited the show, and it was no longer quite the same. So maybe people were kind of clamoring for a return to that, and especially with the original cast. I mean, Steve Carell was the main focal point. Of course, Michael Scott was the main character. Pretty much a great ensemble, but it's yet another instance of the fans clamoring for something and maybe not being. You don't have to be catered to, but maybe seriously think about these things that fans that have been supportive for so many years, what they would like to enjoy, maybe giving them something. It was a nice tease, and of course I'm guessing that all of them are really good friends out in the real world. Hopefully all of them stay, and maybe it's just for us to dream. I know they say the customer is always right. I don't necessarily agree with that. As a customer myself, I don't always know what I want either. But I believe, things like that could be extremely special. It could certainly, add something to our lives again. I mean, we have had a return of Will and Grace, which was a very popular show. Murphy Brown, which was popular many years ago, recently returned to TV. I'm not sure how many people were clamoring for such returns, but we were given them nonetheless. I can only imagine, this year is the last season of Big Bang Theory, and I'm sure that will probably, raise some fans here in a couple years, maybe to be clamoring for a return of those characters as well. I know I tend to kind of really fall in with characters. I'm one of the last ones, maybe one of the last ones that are still on the Walking Dead track. I mean, I followed it from the very beginning. I know probably you listening are probably like, man, why in the world have you continued on this path with this show that has kind of veered off maybe from the original way that it originally started. And personally, and I think a lot of you would maybe agree, it is very hard to quit on characters that you've grown to love so much. And so that goes back to, producers and, the owners of these properties. Please listen to the fans. I know you can't give them everything that we demand and what we ask for, because things are very divisive. As we know, art is subjective, so everybody can think differently about different things, and what I enjoy you may not enjoy, but we all enjoy something, and so I think that could be very important to listen to. Speaking of things that giving the fans what they want, it was just announced as well that Jason Reitman, who is the son of famed director Ivan Reitman, is going to be rebooting the original Ghostbusters with the original cast, or the surviving members. Harold Ramis passed away a few years ago, unfortunately, but the surviving cast, I believe, is on board right now. The original came out in 1984, so I'm obviously that's many decades later. That is still a beloved movie franchise, and of course, as we know, was attempted a reboot in 2016 with an all-female cast and some spectacular females. I mean, we had Kristen Wiig, we had Kate McKinnon, Melissa McCarthy, Leslie Jones, but it was, I think, the producers thinking they knew what the audience or the fans wanted, and that became obviously a problem. Leslie Jones herself has come out here recently, really, I guess, being opposed to this new upcoming film, which has yet to have a release date. I'm guessing it'll probably be 20 or 21 when we see that in theaters. But she was really opposed to that. Meanwhile, obviously the fans are clamoring for any bit of information, because that is such a beloved thing. So I think that's awesome that they have been listening to what the fans. It may have taken a very long time, or it's very hard, obviously, in the movie business, to get funding and to really, for people to believe in your ideas. You have to come with them with a really good idea. Of course, I say that knowing good and well, there's a lot of less than stellar ideas that make it through to production and everything else. But and then giving the fans what they want. Okay. Well, here recently, all of you Netflix fans probably know where I'm going with this. We had a show that was bringing in millions upon millions of viewers in the past couple months, and of course I am talking about the well, I almost said lovely show. It is a very dark show called You. And if you have not seen it, I will warn you, it is pretty bizarre. It's a worthy watch for the drama that unfolds, but it is a very uncomfortable show. But it got so many views that they have already renewed it for a second season, and so they have announced the new cast. They have, pushing forward, and I don't want to spoil anything for those of you that have not. There is the main returning character is the main character. He is returning. They're changing from New York to LA, but they've also brought on a new actress, and it's Victoria Pedretti, who that name may not sound familiar, but for Netflix fans that back in the fall viewed Haunting of Hill House, which is another spectacular show. A very haunting is right. That is, I mean, and I don't mean just ghost haunting. It is a very, very haunting show that sticks with you long after you've watched it. But she played a main character in The Haunting of Hill House. So they have brought together two shows essentially that have scarred me for probably a very long time to come in two completely different ways, but both really, really tough shows to watch and enjoy, but they are enjoyable in their own way. So again, back to what I said, art is subjective. So I am a firm believer in giving the fans what they want, not necessarily what you think that they want, because that your opinion can obviously be completely different than what us fans, I'll count myself as a major fan of many things, believe in. So those are just a few of the things that are kind of coming down, has happened recently, and some things that are coming down the pipeline here. So we're going to go to break right now, and then we'll be coming back with some more pop culture events that have happened recently. And of course, we can't do all negative. We got to throw in some positive for the day as well. So we'll be right back with you here in a few minutes. Here within the past few days, Liam Neeson, of course, we should hopefully all know Liam Neeson, made famous by Taken, and of course many movies before that. He is a very, very extremely well-known actor and a great actor, and I think probably a pretty dang good person as a whole outside of his roles. But he recently did an interview where he was talking about a situation back when he was much, much younger. I believe it was 40 plus years ago that his friend was attacked, and he admitted to being a different time in his life, and obviously a younger man, and the rage that he felt, that he wanted to go out and basically hurt somebody. Now he's coming under fire because the person that attacked his friend was, I'm assuming, was they have said a black man, and so he said that he was going to find just anybody of African American descent to attack himself. He felt all that rage, and of course, obviously, that is a terrible thing to admit, that you felt so badly. And of course, it could have been to him. It could have been maybe any race. He is now being blasted for being considered racist, and as we know, that's a very serious topic, and I take that very seriously myself. But my point in all of this, he is being attacked for admitting to something that he once felt. Many years ago, his friend was freshly attacked, and he was rightfully angry. And as a younger man, he did not know what to do with that anger. And he admitted on this talk show, I believe he's been on Good Morning America this week and maybe a few others now, because especially it's become even bigger news, that he had those dark thoughts. And of course, people are outraged because of the race issue. And I certainly understand, when somebody admits to these thoughts that they had, that just makes your heart sink, because that's a terrible thing to think. But my point, where I'm going with this kind of a downer topic, as it were, is, are we allowed to let people change? It's one of those things, we as men, I can speak as a man, I can't speak as anybody else. We are kind of told to keep our emotions in check, do not show emotion, that kind of thing. And Liam, I guess, in this point in his life, thought, he was very comfortable. He knew he was not in that dark place anymore. And so he outright admitted to having these thoughts. He did not, of course, act on these thoughts, but he admitted to that. And so he, had this interview. And so he admitted to all of this, and he talked about where he was in his life and then where he is, of course, now, all these years later. And he admitted it was terrible to think, but that's what he was thinking at the time. He wanted revenge for the attack of his friend, and I completely understand that side of things as well. As somebody that you love and care about is hurt, but again, I believe that many people, I've seen a lot of support for him. Because from all communities, from all colors, and I think it is pretty amazing that he, I think, as a human being, it seems genuine and has garnered so much support that they're like, he is not racist. He admitted that he was weak and he was vulnerable at that time, and he thanks God that he did not act on those thoughts. But I have seen on the opposite side of that, since he has had this interview, basically people saying, oh, his career is over. He is admitted to something that should never have escaped his lips, especially in a public forum where it's so widely available and reaches so many millions of people, that he should never have done this interview. But I really wholeheartedly disagree. I think I already had a lot of respect for him. I've enjoyed him in a lot of film roles, but also I've seen many interviews with him, and I just think he is a good man. I really do think that. And, we get so caught up in these actors and actresses' TV and movie roles that we think that is them. And, maybe he does have a little hint of his character in Taken or things like that. That would be amazing. We need more Liam Neesons if he really was like that, because I think this world would be a much safer place. But I think that what is really being lost in all this, and like I said, I think the majority understand what he is, what the point he's trying to make is. But I have seen a lot of the opposite of basically saying his career is over. He is a racist. He is violent. All of these things that I think most of us would be feeling at the time. He admitted to this, that he was a weak man. And so I personally, I stand behind someone that male, female, any race, whatever, admitting that they were weak at the time. It sounds so cliche that it takes a lot of strength to show weakness, and he certainly was showing weakness, not only then, and then being vulnerable, making himself vulnerable during this interview that he recently did. But I really think that I really hope there's not a whole lot of blowback. I've seen, like I said, a lot of support for him. But it just kind of, the question I kind of want to leave with that is, is it okay to be vulnerable? I think I've always felt that. I was raised to be vulnerable and not necessarily that doesn't make you any less strong. You can still be assertive and stand up for yourself. But to admit something that hundreds and maybe even thousands of other people could agree with and could relate to, and I hope a lot of people get that out of that. If you go back and kind of read or listen to this interview, and I really hope that when the time comes that more people could be strong and in their weakness, as it were, and everything. So I just want to leave y'all with that, because that was a big story that's been happening this week, and it really is something that really attached to, because I've seen a lot of support from all areas and all around the world, and people of every different demographic. But then, you start seeing, of course, because some people are always going to be negative, you start seeing, the people, like I said, that's saying that his career is over. Why in the world would he say this? And obviously he was very comfortable in saying this and, making himself available because he obviously has been in the game a long time. He knows that how widespread that this is going to become and people, what they're going to make of it. And so hats off to you, Liam Neeson. I stand with you, and I see, thousands of others supporting that. And, it's allowing somebody to change and to say, you can't have, they say you can't have a testimony without a test. And so this was kind of his testimony. He had the test back all those years ago, of having those dark thoughts. I think most of us would probably do the same, but I certainly give my hats off to him for thinking and saying the things that he does now. Obviously not thinking what he did then, because that was unacceptable and terrible. But I really do think that he meant it for a greater good, as it were. And so I'm really happy when, because celebrities, believe it or not, are just like us. I mean, they are not these strong characters necessarily that we see portrayed, and so I really think that he did great, and of course he's going to have to shoulder a lot of stuff on him now for the possible backlash, but again, it takes a strong person to do that. I mean, to hold it up all inside is not to help your fellow man. I mean, that really, sharing your story could certainly help others. Sorry, this is supposed to be a lighthearted show. I kind of went really deep on, I guess, my own journey here we're having this morning. But it's my first show. We can do what we want, right? Welcome back. This is our second hour of Meticulously Ridiculous. I am your host, Jason. As I mentioned in our first hour, we're going to be discussing the Mandela Effect. I'll explain a little bit what that is here in a bit. I think some of you probably already know. But something that is going to be a weekly feature on my show is my Touch of Gold moment. And basically, I'll be sharing the wit and wisdom of one of my favorite actors and probably just human beings, Mr. Jeff Goldblum. That's why I call it Touch of Gold, because gold bloom. So today's Touch of Gold wisdom. As soon as you're interested in what is good taste, then you're in bad taste land already. What's comfortable and what represents your life? What's unique and individual about you? That's style. So that is your Touch of Gold moment for my first show. I think we all can agree, or a lot of us can agree, that Jeff Goldblum is filled with lots of wisdom. Just a great guy. So we'll be getting a lot of that in the weeks to come. But the Mandela Effect. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Mandela Effect was named so-called for an event that occurred Nelson Mandela, who was a big time civil rights and imprisoned in South Africa for many years and things like that. It is named the Mandela Effect because this is an occurrence that happened where many people thought that he died long before he actually died. And so a lot of people had come out about this, and people started paying attention that something's a little amiss here. How could so many people remember the exact wrong thing? And so they dubbed this the Mandela Effect. Basically, it is many people believing the wrong thing or trying to explain their memories, I guess, of large segments of the population are not believing what has happened in our current reality. So then people start thinking, of course, of alternate realities and things like that. That then you just kind of keep going off into La La Land, as it were. But I first heard about this at the end of last year. I was completely unfamiliar. This term has been around for a little while, but if you're like myself, you were very unfamiliar with what this is. And so that was just one instance of that. Now, there have been some really famous ones. I'm going to talk probably a couple of those, but I'll be adding some that maybe are a little bit lesser known. I believe, though, in doing the research for this and reading as much about this as I have, that we're all guilty of this. We're all guilty of misremembering, or if something else in pop culture or life references something that has come before it, sometimes they paraphrase, sometimes they change it altogether. And so it changes our memories over time. We become where we believe what we hear now is what was originally said. So like one of the most famous ones, Star Wars, of course, is extremely popular and has been for many decades, that the line that we all know that Darth Vader says to Luke after he has chopped off Luke's hand in Empire Strikes Back, "Luke, I am your father." That is incorrect. He does not ever say Luke. He says, no, I am your father. And so that is one example where people start thinking, my goodness, what is wrong with my brain that I've seen this movie 1,000 times. How in the world am I misremembering what I saw? And so that is one of the more famous examples of the Mandela Effect. But another one that I found, again, in the same universe, as it were, in the Star Wars universe, what color is C-3PO? You're envisioning him right now. If you've seen the Star Wars movies, he is all gold, correct? He is not all gold. He has always had a silver leg. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're trying to picture him or look it up now. You're thinking, of course, he's always been gold. Now, obviously, in the newer versions here, he has a red arm. That is a new addition that has been added in these later chapters, in these new later episodes. But originally, I think I personally always thought he was completely gold. I would never have paid attention that maybe the lighting or whatever, but he has always had a silver leg. And I believe it is his right, from his knee down on his right leg, has always been silver. Now, what about Silence of the Lambs? It's a little bit older movie, just like Star Wars, but we all remember the line, "Hello, Clarice," when Clarice Starling first appears down in the cell area with Dr. Lecter. He never says, "Hello, Clarice." I believe it's something to the effect of "Hello, Agent Sterling," something like that. But he never says, "Hello, Clarice." I have done I do a lot of pop culture references in conversation, and I have probably said "Hello, Clarice" in that creepy voice a lot, and never thinking that I was completely wrong. But it is not "Hello, Clarice." He has actually never said that. Now, one of the most famous ones is if you were probably raised with the Berenstain Bear books. There is a huge collection of those, and so we all remember that it was spelled Berenstein, Berenstain Bears. No, incorrect. We have all remembered incorrectly. It was Berenstain Bears. So Berenstain. That is the correct spelling. How in the world? Why are our brains doing this to us that we are completely misremembering something we have seen over and over and over? I really don't have an answer for that. I just think that these are extremely fascinating. This is something else you probably don't think about. If you were a fan of cereal, such as I am, breakfast cereal that is, you have probably eaten Frosted Flakes for most of your life, maybe one in your rotation if you have several cereals that you like. What color is Tony the Tiger's nose? You think it's black, don't you? I always thought it was black. He's a tiger. I know he's a cartoon tiger, but I would never have thought that his nose would be anything other than black. Well, actually, his nose is blue. The next time you are walking down the supermarket aisle to the cereal aisle, take a peek. His nose is blue. Also, this one is probably the most famous one. This is something that has been tried to have been debunked, but people still believe they believe everybody involved is lying to us. They think that they've pulled one big trick, one big joke on us. Have you ever seen the 90s movie Shazam starring Sinbad, the 80s and 90s comedian? Actually, he's still around. I just saw a recent stand-up special with him, so I shouldn't relegate him to that, but I think that's probably when his fame was at its peak. But have you seen the 90s Genie family movie, Shazam, starring Sinbad? A lot of us remember he was a wacky genie, not quite like Aladdin, but or like in Aladdin, but he was this wacky guy who's Sinbad. You know, he normally plays those roles. But actually, you have never, ever seen a movie starring Sinbad as a genie. There was a 90s movie called Kazam starring Shaquille O'Neal. Those have been flip-flop back and forth in people's brains over and over and over. Recently, Sinbad himself came out. He was unaware that people had been pondering on this for many, many years, trying to find a copy of either a VHS, a DVD, some semblance of a copy of this movie that they remember seeing when they were children or teenagers. Whatever age that they were at that time, they remember watching this, I guess, funny. I mean, I'm assuming people thought it was funny if they're remembering it. Funny film. Well, come to find out, it actually never existed. Sinbad never starred in a movie called Shazam. He was in plenty of others, but people mistakenly think that Kazam was Shazam. Now, one that's a little bit more, recent, a little bit more topical because of the the popularity of the great movie Bohemian Rhapsody. If you haven't seen that, especially if you're a Queen fan, I highly recommend Bohemian Rhapsody. Rami Malek, who portrays Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen, deservedly won the Golden Globe for Best Actor, and I really do think he should and hopefully will win the Academy Award for portraying Freddie Mercury in the upcoming Oscars. But it's fantastic. The musical numbers are wonderful. We all have heard for many years, because Queen has been around a long time, we have all heard "We Are the Champions," of course. We probably sang it. We hear it at sporting events. We see it on movies. We especially see it on movies when it's like the culmination, the climax. A team has won the championship or has won the big game. Or even if they haven't won, they are champions because they learned teamwork. You know how all the cliches go. So most people think that we are the champions. How does the rest of that go? It ends the very ending of the song, because that's the big note that everybody tries to hit. We are the champions of the world. Right? That is how I almost said Bohemian Rhapsody. We Are the Champions ends. That is actually incorrect. That song does not end on "of the world." That phrase is actually used in the song, so it does kind of have some connection to the song, but it has never ended that way. So why in the world are we remembering the end of a lyric that we have all sung 1,000 times? Yet another Mandela Effect occurrence. Now, this is one that is near and dear to my heart, and probably to a lot of yours as well. How do you spell Chick-fil-A? Here in Oklahoma, we have only had Chick-fil-A relatively short time in comparison to other states, but they began in having in the food courts at the malls, and that's at least that's where I discovered it, and then we started seeing stores pop up all around, and of course hugely successful. But how do you spell Chick-fil-A? I think personally this is one that hits really close to home. I always thought that it was CHIC hyphen FIL hyphen A. There is actually a K. So Chick-fil-A, not more. I was thinking more like chic-fil-A. Maybe I was using an accent in my brain. Maybe I was unaware of. But it is actually CHICK hyphen FIL hyphen A. Most of us do thoroughly enjoy Chick-fil-A, and maybe these things that we are seeing every day just become so commonplace that we just kind of gloss over the details. I think maybe the Mandela Effect is something that is something that is a reminder to start paying more attention to the details of our life, maybe the smaller details, maybe not down to the smallest detail, but I think it's extremely interesting that we've actually all misremembered so many things. And when I started reading that, I started feeling not personally attacked, but it felt very personal. So I'm like, well, I have done that. Not all of these, but I have done a lot of these. Man, maybe I'm not alone in this great big world. We have all, misremembered or had these moments where we think we know the answer. We know we're right, and we are slapped down every time because we are completely incorrect. So I'm going to leave y'all with that, play a little bit more music, come back maybe with a couple more Mandela Effect, and then I will wrap up. And I sure thank you for listening thus far. Hopefully you're still with me and have enjoyed today's show, my first show of this new year. So we'll get you with some music, and we'll be back with you soon. A new just knew that it was something was one way when it is completely something different. So I had a few more examples that I thought were kind of interesting. There is a Mr. Rogers one. Most of us all know Mr. Rogers. He is an icon of goodness, and people absolutely adore him. I am a huge fan myself. Sidebar: if you haven't seen, what's the there's a documentary out. Won't You Be My Neighbor? I could not think of it. It's so wonderful. It's probably one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. So Won't You Be My Neighbor? If you are interested in documentaries and just good films and things that are just going to uplift you and add some positivity to your life, I highly recommend Won't You Be My Neighbor, about the life and the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and of course about Fred Rogers himself. But anyway, the one about Mr. Rogers is about the theme song that, of course, Mr. Rogers, in the beginning of each show, he sings. And basically, a lot of people have always thought it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It is actually a beautiful day in this neighborhood. It's kind of one of those where you don't think about it, while you're singing it. The and this kind of are very similar in the way that we speak them, but it is actually a beautiful day in this neighborhood. So that was kind of an interesting one. And then this game has been around for so long. Monopoly has been around for decades upon decades. It is super popular game. They have so many different versions of that, depicting either favorite movies, TV shows, pop culture, of course, et cetera, et cetera. And we've all probably gotten angry at siblings, at family members, and probably stormed off maybe every now and again during. Am I the only one? Okay. But I'm going to put it out there. I mean, that happens. I'm very competitive, and I don't think I'm the lone one. But we all know the Mr. Moneybags, who is a.k.a. the Monopoly Man. But he does have a name. I believe it's Mr. Moneybags. And the Mandela Effect comes into play here on the Monopoly one. Does Mr. Monopoly, a.k.a. Mr. Moneybags, does he have a monocle? A monocle would be a single lens, half of a pair of glasses, if you want to say that, but a little, sight improver, as it were. But does Mr. Monopoly have a monocle? He actually does not. We've all seen Monopoly and have played it many times over the years. McDonald's has their annual Monopoly game that they have. You peel off the things and have to collect them all and hopefully win some prizes and win instant prizes, etc. And Mr. Monopoly plays a prominent, part in advertising, of course, and he is the spokesperson, as it were, or the icon of the game of Monopoly. He does not have a monocle on. So that one kind of threw me for a loop, because I always thought he had some type of eyewear. I knew he didn't wear glasses, but I always thought something was in play there. Now, this one really blew my mind. I think because this has been around for centuries, as it were, and I have no idea if any of you will be as blown away. I know I certainly was. Most everybody, in some part of their life or some time of their life, has come in contact with a play of Shakespeare. Obviously, he wrote many, many things that have been, popularized and read in high schools and middle schools and colleges, universities across the world for centuries. Obviously, he wrote all those many, many years ago. But I just recently discovered this part of the Mandela Effect because this has been shown in a lot of pop culture, a lot of movies and TV. It's been shown a certain way, so I think we all remember it because of what we have seen, and so they have obviously gotten it wrong as well. Romeo and Juliet, that is what I'm going to talk about Romeo and Juliet did not have a balcony scene. Yeah, exactly. I did not know what to think myself. Romeo and Juliet never had a balcony scene in the actual play. That has been added along the years here, into different variations of Romeo and Juliet. Wherefore art thou, Romeo, etc. You're picturing it in your mind right now. You can see Romeo down in the garden looking up at Juliet up on the balcony. That never happened in the actual literature. That one really threw me for a loop. So that is the last Mandela Effect I'm gonna end on, because that's kind of a bombshell, because we all think we know the works of Shakespeare so well because they have been around for so long, and we're just kind of, they're pounded into our brains. But that one, yes, there is no balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet. So go play a couple more songs, be back with my closing remarks, and we'll get right back with you, okay? 9 a.m. every single Wednesday morning right here on StudiOU on the TuneIn app. We'll get you right there, favorite StudiOU. And we will see you next time. In future shows, we're going to be a lot more interactive. I will be asking some things of y'all, and we'll find ways to interact with each other. But thank y'all so much. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your week, and stay safe out there.